Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Noreen and I make watercolor tutorials, painting videos, and art supply reviews. Today I'm going to compare 3 different affordable watercolor papers that are all 140-pound cold pressed and 100% cotton to see how they stand up to arches. Since arches can be a bit expensive, I'm always on the lookout for more affordable options that will still give me decent results. I'm often afraid to use the expensive paper and then I don't paint as much, which is silly. The papers I'll be testing today are the Strathmore 500 series cotton sheets, available in 10x8 packs of 10 sheets, the Meeden paper block, available in a 10x7 block of 20 sheets, and the Arteza cotton pad, available in a 9x12 pad of 14 sheets. The categories I'll be ranking them in are price per sheet of 9x12, washes, wet and wet, lifting and scrubbing, and my overall opinion. To get this figure, I calculated the price per square inch based on the price listed on Amazon at the time of this recording. I then multiplied that amount by 108, which is the total number of square inches in a 9x12 sheet. Arches paper is $2 per sheet and available on Amazon for $24.99 per pack of 12 9x12 sheets. Arteza is $1.50 per sheet, available for $20.99 per pack of 14 9x12 sheets. Strathmore 500 series is $1.45 per sheet, available for $21.41 for 2 packs of 10 8x10 sheets. And the Meeden block is $1.16 per sheet, available for $14.99 per pack of 20 10x7 sheets. To figure out which wash is better, I'm looking for several different things. I'm looking to see how smooth the wash is. Is the color streaky? Did it sit on top of the paper or soak in nicely? Did it spread smoothly? Are there any hard edges? Those are the kind of things that I'm looking for. Some things I noticed with the Strathmore paper was that the color sat on top of the paper rather than soaking into it like with arches or even any of the other papers that I'm trying today. With the Meeden block, the color seemed a little streaky, but really not that bad. The paper itself is definitely more toothy, so you can see the granulation a bit more, and it also seemed to weaken the paper, which was similar to the Strathmore. The arches and the Arteza were both smooth with minimal warping, so that was really nice. Another thing I noticed was that the color on the Meeden block came out really vibrant compared to the Strathmore and the Arteza, and even the arches looked duller than the Meeden block, so that was a really nice surprise. However, the edges on the Meeden block are a lot harder. There's definitely a dark line there, as well as with the Arteza. To judge this category, I'm looking at a lot of the same things that I'm looking at when I did the straight wash section. I'm looking to see if the water and the paint sit on top of the paper or if they soak into the paper properly. I'm also checking to see if the color spreads nicely on the wet paper or if it leaves sharp edges where it shouldn't. I'm expecting the paint to spread out and bloom out on wet paper, and I also want to see how quickly the paper dries. So generally, once you pre-wet a page, it should stay wet for at least a few minutes while you add color so that you get a much softer effect. Some things that I noticed was that the Arches paper actually warped a lot worse than the Arteza paper, which I wasn't expecting. The Arteza paper actually had a nice soft fade to it. The paper didn't warp too badly and there weren't any harsh streaks. The Meeden block was a little streaky, but it wasn't that bad. However, there were a lot of harsh edges, and the Strathmore paper actually performed the worst in this category, I think, because the paint stuck to the paper, it warped pretty badly, and the color just came out looking splotchy. Lifting is removing the paint from the paper while it's still wet, and scrubbing is doing so after the paint has dried. This is often used as a corrective action or to infer highlighted areas. Today I'm using just whatever color was left on my palette, but none of them are particularly staining and they're not extremely easy to lift either, so this should be good to see how well each paper performs. One of the things I noticed was actually how well the Strathmore paper lifted while it was wet. However, there are some really hard edges around the area that I lifted compared to the Arteza paper that lifted just as well without the harsh lines. The Meeden paper did pretty good actually, but I would say that the Arteza and the Strathmore lifted a little better, and surprisingly, the Arteza paper was the worst. It made this horrible splotch in the middle. I don't understand. It looks awful and I don't like it at all. For the scrubbing, the Strathmore performed the worst. The paper pilled up almost immediately and just got destroyed. There's no way I'd be able to go over that with another color and have it look good at all. In comparison, the Arteza paper and the Meeden block didn't really lift that much. I felt like, especially with the Arteza paper, it was really hard to get any lift out of that area at all. And between the Meeden block and Arches, I'd say they're about the same, with Arches lifting a little more easily on an area that's been scrubbed. So for the last section, I just did a little doodle and the last square on each of these, just really seeing how well they perform if I were to try and make something real. I also did two paintings so I did one on the Arteza pad and I also did one on the Meeden block, both of which use many layers, lots of wet and wet, both scrubbing and lifting to see how well they would perform. And I gotta say, I'm actually really impressed with both of them compared to the Strathmore, which I've used for years, and honestly, I'm in love with how cheap they are and how affordable they are. Even given, you know, some of the performance issues during the testing, when I went to do an actual painting, I didn't feel like I had a lot of trouble getting the effects that I was looking for. So this is the painting that I did on the Arteza pad, which is 9x12. I used mostly Daniel Smith and core paints. I used a little white gouache here for the stars as well. As you can see, there's a lot of layers. So I started with an underpainting with just the colors, and then I did a glaze with Payne's Gray, and I let that dry. I did another glaze of Payne's Gray to get the corners a little darker and bring the shadows in towards the middle. I let that dry, and then I did more color layers and more Payne's Gray. I did another glaze, and then I put the gouache, and then I did another layer of the colors on top of the gouache, and then I did several layers for this darker area. So, and I scrubbed around here quite a bit to bring back, to get that kind of like misty look. So this page went through a lot, and it did warp, not a lot. I taped it down to the pad itself, so it wasn't terrible, but it definitely did warp compared to the Meeden block piece, which was glued to the side, so maybe that's why it didn't warp as badly. But the colors on this came out great. I really like how it performed, and even though it's a little streaky here, I think that's more due to my technique than the paper itself. So overall, I'm really pleased with how this turned out. This is the painting that I did on the Meeden block. So just like the other one, I did several layers, lots of scrubbing to get some of the highlights on the rocks, a lot of glazing. I used gouache. So this started out with this underpainting where I just did a wash and I threw in some different colors, and then I sketched out where I wanted the rocks, and then I did another wash over each of the rocks with the different colors that I wanted with glazing, and then I did the gouache, and then I did another glaze with the blue, and then I did the gouache part, and I did some scrubbing to get those you know, less harsh, and then I did another glaze for the shadows and outlined more of the middle areas. So this also went through a lot, and you'll see the warping is certainly not as bad as the Arteza pad. I actually really like the texture of this paper, if you can tell. So this turned out really well. I'm really happy with this as well. The size is kind of small, but having it in a block like this is actually really convenient for me, because I feel like I can take this almost anywhere. It's a nice size to put in my purse with my, you know, travel paints, and just take a little bottle of water with me and it's good to go. If you actually would like a tutorial on how to paint something like this or something like this, let me know in the comments. I would love to go over something like that for you guys. Okay, so without further ado, here are the rankings. This is Arches, and since Arches is the control for comparison, it's not included in the final ranking, but I will say that it's not my favorite, even though it should be. So in last place is the Strathmore paper, because this is terrible. This the way it just destroyed the paper when I tried to scrub it, and the way the color deposited in the wet and wet is not good. It like got stuck to the paper. It didn't spread very nicely. It just didn't perform very well. When doing the lifting, like I said, the harsh edge is not ideal. It's not great. It's, you know, I'll say that for practice, for learning, absolutely, I would go with the Strathmore because it's very affordable. In terms of the price, it was, you know, very similar to the Arteza pad, so it's really your preference. They're all affordable, so that is one benefit, but not my favorite. Next is the Meeden block, which I really enjoyed using in my personal painting. However, the wet and wet came out really terrible. It didn't lift very well, but the way the granulation shows up because of how rough it is, really nice. And I also really like how it's in a block form, so you don't have to tape it down. It's already done for you. The lifting was fine, you know, otherwise it's fine. It's the cheapest paper of all of these, so it's a really good option for practicing. Definitely worth getting if you want to learn certain techniques, but watch out for that. And the winner of the three, the Arteza paper. I wasn't expecting a lot out of this, to be honest, but despite how ineffective the scrubbing was, it lifted really nicely, nice and smooth. The wet and wet turned out great. You know, it warped, but you can deal with that by wetting the back of the page and sticking it on a piece of glass or a board like this. You can tape it down and let it dry like that, and it'll be totally fine. You can also iron it. So this was definitely the clear winner in my opinion. So If you're thinking of getting into watercolor, one of the biggest issues that a lot of beginners, and myself included, run into is thinking that when you get bad results, it's you. It's not you. Almost all of the time it's the paper. If you're working on bad paper like the Canson XL sketchbook, which isn't really good paper at all, you're gonna struggle. So it's good to have cotton options like these. All of these are available on Amazon. The links are in the description. Absolutely go get yourself one of these pads of paper, because it will make your learning process so much easier if you're not struggling and fighting against the paper. And look, it came out better than the arches, so definitely worth a shot. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave me a like, comment, subscribe, and watch out for my next one. Thanks. Bye.